समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Our Prime Minister keeps on saying this is not the era of war. The truth, however, is this has sort of willy-nilly become an era of war just when nobody imagined such a thing happening in the modern world. Rupert Smith, the British general, wrote that famous book, Utility of Force, where he said the era of industrial scale warfare is now over. Now it's been proven wrong because more than an industrial scale warfare has waged between Russia and Ukraine, actually with Russian invasion of Ukraine for more than 3 years now. So this is going on. At the same time, we've seen many other conflicts break out. In fact, if you count from Donald Trump, maybe he's already ended about 7 or 8 of them, which entitle him to 10 or 12 Nobel Prizes, right? That sarcasm apart, the fact is that today we have a world at war. There are too many small, protracted and also prolonged wars that are going on, and not just in Africa. It's in that situation that we also had our Op Sindoor. This is just a bit after 100 days to Op Sindoor, and over the next few days you will also see some buzz over this week marking the 60th anniversary of India's first full-fledged war. That was 1965 against Pakistan. 1962 against China, we don't call a full-fledged war because that's where only the army was involved. In 1965, Indian Army and the Air Force were involved. Indian Navy was not that involved, but Pakistan Navy was involved. So that was a full-fledged tri-service war. 60 years to that and a little over 100 days to Op Sindoor. Now the question arises, after any of these skirmishes, wars, etc., what happened? Who got the better of the other? And then the counts. Who lost what? Who destroyed what? And these then become eternal controversies and arguments. Now about warfare, I can quote to you many cliched famous lines. I can tell you when a war breaks out, truth is the first casualty. I can also tell you that the problem with history of war is that it's always written by the victor, right? So where is the loser side? And that's why even Clint Eastwood, after he had done his big celebrated Flags of Our Fathers on the Battle of Iwo Jima, he also looked at the picture from the Japanese side, because while the Americans were fighting there very bravely, they were also the brave Japanese who were fighting to the end. So he did a kind of a look at the same battle, the same really bloody and devastating battle from the Japanese side. And that was letters from Iwo Jima. So very few people, very few historians are able to look at the picture from the two sides. Now, Op Sindoor in particular was mostly, although the army did a lot of work there, army in fact hit 7 of the 9 targets that were earmarked for Op Sindoor. Army used precision-guided artillery shells, Excalibur rounds, and drones, etc. That apart, what has drawn attention, and what's been the talking point is the aerial warfare. And once again, there are claims on the Pakistani side, claims on the Indian side. In fact, I had done an extended national interest going over 3,300 words instead of the usual 1,250 words. 3,300 words. It was a 29-minute video as well, which many of you watched. Learning from Op Sindoor and also trying to draw a picture of the rival doctrines, the IAF and PAF doctrine. And we had then said that Pakistan Air Force is risk averse. It's risk averse. It wants to avoid own casualties. At the same time, it practices the art of ambush, and it does it quite effectively to try and inflict casualties on the other side. Casualty means shooting down aircraft. So it can claim that we shot down so many compared to so many. We had also said then that in every India-Pakistan engagement, IAF has actually lost more aircraft than PAF, but in the end, IAF it is, or the Indian side it is, that has ended up winning the war. So that is a doctrinal difference. One is just fighting a battle, a limited battle with the rival air force and looking at the score in terms of the aircraft shot down. The other one, that's the Indian Air Force, is looking at the big picture. It's trying to win the war for their country. And just as PAF is risk averse, IAF, in fact, is less worried about risks. It's more gung-ho and more aggressive. Now, how did I draw that wisdom? I did not dream it up from the top of my head. If you want to watch that stuff, you should watch your TV channels. Every evening you will get some version of that. I did whatever reading was available, and a lot of that reading came from these two books that you see here. I had also displayed these books when I recorded that video with that national interest. So this is 1965, the India-Pakistan Air War of 1965 by PVS Jagan Mohan and Samir Chopra. And then this is Eagles over Bangladesh, the Indian Air Force in the 1971 Liberation War. Now, these books have enormous detail. These are not just books with stories. These have names, tail numbers, details, so you know who lost what. Everything is documented like this, right? And these are Indian authors who did that and who got details from the other side. I had also quoted from Air Commodore Kaisar Tufail's book. He's a Pakistan Air Force pilot and historian. He also wrote a book on the 1971 war. So we had drawn from all of these. Now, why am I talking to you about this today? That's because quite fortuitously, we have in New Delhi one of the two authors of these books. That is PVS Jagan Mohan. He is in Delhi and he came in for a seminar at USI, the Venerable United Services Institution. He was speaking there, and then our defense editor, Snehesh Alex Philip, sort of grabbed him, put him under arrest and brought him to our newsroom. So I have him for company and Snehesh will join in. Two of them will join us now and we will talk in a little bit more detail about the challenges of getting to the truth in these very dusty, muddy, foggy situations, also where claims and counterclaims fly from both sides, and also jingoistic media, jingoistic and very creative media gets in the picture from both sides. In fact, since many of you have asked me from where did we get authentic data of the aircraft losses of both sides on the ground and in the air, and also to non-operational causes in our conflict so far, that is also owed to Bharat Rakshak website. And that also is run by Jagan Mohan. On which note now, I will request Snehesh Alex Philip and Jagan Mohan to join us. Jagan, let me put you on the spot to begin with. And I know you've been asked this question before. But Eagles over Bangladesh, that is the Indian Air Force in the 1971 Liberation War, only the eastern sector, Bangladesh sector. Where is the book on the western sector? Because that is where most of the air warfare took place.
So that is one of the most oft-asked questions whenever I meet fellow aviation warfare enthusiasts. The answer to that, I have to go back a little bit more to answer that question is, I started off first along with my co-author to Samir Chopra to work on the 1965.
Samir Chopra is now a professor of philosophy in the US.
In the US. And Samir's dad was an Air Force officer who was awarded the Veer Chakra in the 65 conflict, hence his interest in documenting this side of things. So me and Samir sort of teamed up in the early 2000s. But the story of the 65 war book, and again, I'll come to answering the question about the 1971 war, started much before that. Right after I read in the late 80s, I read Air Chief Marshal Lal's book. It was for a teenager.
My Years with the IAF.
My Years with the IAF. For a teenager who read that book, I would say that book was mind-blowing. The
It
amount of
was
detail.
also remarkably honest,
It was remarkably honest.
including listing our own losses.
Our own losses. For the 71 war, and again, right, when I say it was like a joint effort by Air Chief Marshal Lal, and his wife took over and sort of completed that
Yes,
work.
because he passed away.
Because he passed away in between. But nothing of that sort was written up to that point about the IAF or its contribution in the 71 war. But that book also left certain questions in me, because he doesn't really write about the 65 operations as much in detail as
And
he
he
writes
had a
about
ringside
71.
view of 65 also.
Yes, he was the
working
vice
with-
chief.
Yeah.
He was the vice chief of air staff. He had a ringside view. And there are a lot of cryptic statements he makes in the book where he touches upon certain aspects that we could view as setbacks to the AF, but really doesn't provide
65.
details. In 65. So that left me wondering, okay, what actually happened in 65? And surprisingly, there was no book or history of the IAF in the 65 war that I could find or I could locate. And that's where that journey of discovery started. The book started off as an effort, as my personal effort to learn what happened with the IAF and the PAF, and over a period of time it took the shape of that book. I think it is only about the advent of the internet in Hyderabad in around the late 90s that the research picked up steam. That's how I got in touch with Samir, who was also helping me with interviews and data and information. The fun fact is we never met till I moved to the US. So it was a meeting over the internet, by emails, by phone calls, and we researched that book, and I would say it took us about
That's like Salim and Javed writing Sholay, sitting in different countries. Huh?
You could say that. You could say that. So it took a greater part of about 8 years to bring India-Pakistan Air War to publication, and Manohar Publishers
1965. It's quite remarkable of Manohar to keep on publishing these books, although this is HarperCollins. But yes, go ahead. But I have to tell you something. He says it took them 8 years to put this book together. Again, if you read this book, just the detail in the book, see this, you can see these tables, charts, each side's claims, numbers of pilots, that is their commissioning numbers, tail numbers of aircraft, everything is there in these books. So it's a lot of documentation. And this despite the fact that, Jagan, you have a day job. You have a very successful, very fulfilling and very rewarding day job in a completely different profession. Nothing to do with any of this.
That is true. So at least I have a day job that is not related
In
to
the US, in New York.
Yeah, to the, and of course at that time I was still in Hyderabad in India doing.
Everybody who was halfway literate in Hyderabad went to the US. That's what Mega is complaining about now.
And as we were researching the 65 war, we realized that most of the veterans who fought the 65 war also fought in 71. So
Right.
it only made sense that when we interview them about the 1965 operations, to also ask them about 71 operations. So we were collecting data without even thinking about a future project. And once the book came out, we knew even before the book came out that we have to continue this work and write about the 71 operations as well. And the questions started coming in as soon as the book hit the enthusiast market. That, okay, are you guys working on a 71 operations book? And the answer was, of course, yes. We wanted to do that. Air Chief Marshal Lal's book existed, and there were all several other smaller books, or squadron level histories or
There was
personal accounts.
Also John Fricker's account sponsored by Pakistan Air Force. He's the hagiographer of Pakistan Air Force. He was. And then the reply to him by Pushpinder Singh Chopra.
Exactly. So there was
New Delhi magazine that Khushwant Singh used to edit at that
yes,
point.
and credit to Mr. Pushpinder Singh, because he is a doyen of aviation history. He has written so many articles and books up to that point, and that helped us in our research as well. And he was also an encouraging force along with Air Commodore Jasjit Singh. They read the initial draft of the 65 Air War book and said, "You guys are on the right path. Continue on this. We would like to see this in print." Yes. And
that's quite remarkable that Air Commodore Jasjit Singh, who was serving, his son was also a fighter pilot, And Jasjeet Singh was the soul of the IAF. In fact, just to tell you a little story on the side, if you remember the Larkin's spy scam, right? The two-star officers who were arrested for spying. Who was the person who trapped them? It was Jasjeet Singh, who in their headquarters became a willing bait. So these two would come and offer him something in return for information. And this was a trap in which these two-star officers walked in. So it was the same Jasjeet Singh, given his loyalty and commitment to the Air Force and how passionately he felt about it. And afterwards, as he became an academic after retiring, he also served with us in the Indian Express as our consulting editor for strategic affairs. So before C. Raja Mohan. So he also endorsed a book like this. But Jagan, I'm sure you got a lot of pushback for this book because this is not the one-sided view that a lot of the popular media and the general belief was.
So, surprisingly, the pushback was not, and in fact, I would say the pushback was not really significant. In fact, a lot of folks were appreciative about learning about the IAF in the 65 war for the first time. I mean, it is amazing. In 1965, the war happened. There was no singular volume that spoke about the air war till 2005, 40 years later. And even today, on the 60th anniversary of the war, there have only been two books that talk about the IAF in 65. One is this, and Air Marshal Bharat Kumar wrote another book on similar lines with a lot more detail because he had access to official records that was released on the 50th anniversary of the 65 war. But in 60 years, you have only two books. But we got the first shot at writing the book, and we decided from the beginning itself that we will write a balanced account. We are not going to go into the hagiographic, jingoistic version that John Fricker put out.
You will have no future on Indian News TV. That I promise you.
So, and we looked at all the claims objectively, and as you keep reading the news articles and the releases, the press releases from that time, the obvious questions popped up, and several of those we addressed in that particular in that book. Luckily, we received nothing but support from the Air Force, but after the fact. After the book was published, I got a lot of encouragement.
But that's very healthy of the Air Force to be willing to look within.
Exactly, right? So
because 1965 was a tough outing for Indian Air Force.
It was not a war that went well for the Air Force to start with, or even in some of the central parts of it. That being said, prior to us publishing the book, I can understand that situation. We were nobodies, right? Two academics, one sitting in Hyderabad, the other sitting in New York, trying to put together a book on the Air Force. So the Air Force didn't know who we were. But once the book came out, the reviews came out, the Air Force was very encouraging in terms of the support they gave us as authors. In fact, I should call out Air Chief Marshal Tyagi. Once he got a copy, he wrote me a nice letter saying, I'm going to make sure that the Air Force orders books to keep in the Air Force stations and squadrons. And I believe Manohar got that order, supply 200 copies. And so from the Air Force perspective, I received nothing but encouragement. And it also showed that they didn't mind us talking about some of the setbacks, some of the losses that we suffered either on the ground or in the air.
But that's a sign of a good professional Air Force.
It is. And maybe it was the first time that we openly talked about the days that did not go well for us in terms of the losses. But it also showed us that we were grown up and we were willing to...
That there was resilience.
There was resilience and we were willing to correct our version of history. And talking about the Pakistani side, you will see that in Air Commodore Tufail's writings. You will see some of that in Air Commodore Sajid Haidar's writing. In fact, he wrote a book, The Flight of the Falcon, in which he quoted his primary source of motivation of writing the book was reading India-Pakistan Air War of 1965, and he says that in positive terms. And he was willing to go on record and reverse many of the fantastical claims the PAF made in 1965.
30 seconds over Sargodha.
30 seconds over Sargodha, or the air battle over Halwara, that with Rafiki and Cecil Chowdhury. A lot of those, he was willing to walk back on those claims and write a more...
That Rafiki is the one after whom the Pakistani air base at Shorkot is named. And he died when shot down near Halbada and was buried close to the air base.
Yes.
And that's where also the Op Sindoor, under Op Sindoor, it got targeted also.
Yes, and this time Rafiki was, Shorkot was targeted.
Yeah. So, but beyond these two gentlemen officers, there is still a reluctance to walk back on some of those fantastical claims on 65. Even today, no serving PAF officer is going to say this didn't happen the way we claimed it to be. So, in that sense, I think the Indian Air Force has been pretty much been receptive about revisiting the stories from 65 as well as 71.
Snehesh, want to come in now?
You know, when you say that the Indian Air Force was always receptive to the truth, or let's say to the truth, and they were able to go back and relook at the versions that have been put out. I think that's what the Air Force has always done, right? But in a sense, in the recent operations, do you see, for example, let's say what happened since then? The Kargil information is yet to be out.
I have to qualify that statement has been receptive after a certain period of time. I mean, it took 40 years for them to be open to this version of the 65 war. 71 was what we call a spectacular victory, right? The objectives were achieved. Nobody cared about the losses.
Losses, yes. Yes.
Because
the approach was that you have to go hell for leather and get it over with.
I mean, the result is so what we call so clear-cut, spectacular that it really didn't matter. We lost 20 aircraft on day one of the war, which is probably half the planes we lost in 65. Did the newspapers cry about, oh, we lost 8 Sukhois in Chumb or 5 Hunters in Pakistan? No, it didn't matter because the cause was something that we believed in. We knew what the end result was, and the focus was on the end result. So there wasn't much of what you call obscuring of failures in 71, but 65 certainly it took time for folks to grow out of it, mostly because similar to, and I have to draw similarities to Op Sindoor, because we built some mythology around the 65 conflict. We covered up certain losses. We built up some of our own
Nat as the saber slayer.
Nat as the saber slayer, or we putting Sargodha out of action. I'm sure the newspaper reports are chock full of stories of heroism. And there wasn't really an admission of the things that did not go well. For example, a popular statement is, for decades we always believed MiG-21s never took part in the 65 war. But now we know that they took part in air combat. There were losses for MiG-21s. MiG-21s were like the Rafales of...
Losses were on the ground.
On the ground. But they were like the Rafales of today. They were the latest and greatest weapon at
just
that time.
coming in. The squadron was just been formed. Yeah.
But they took part in operations. We sent a detachment. They tangled with sabers, but had the misfortune of being caught on the ground. But we didn't talk about those stories for 30 years, 40 years. Now, I'm not saying that Op Sindoor stories will take 30 or 40 years. That's for the new generation to figure it out and bring the true story. Like, we know the high-level details, but I would like to know the stories of the pilots and the air crew that displayed this heroism in carrying out this mission. Those stories have to be told, if possible. So, it took us 8 years to do the 65 war. Then immediately we said, we are going to work on the 71 project, and it was supposed to be a single volume book. And as time went on, we were getting bogged down in the research, which was just never ending. Then, family happens. I got married. My first daughter was born. Same thing with Samir. And there was a point where I told Samir, if you're trying to write this entire volume, we will never get it done. It will take us 20 years. Why don't we do it? We'll split it. Let's tackle Eastern sector first, get it out of the way, then we'll go do the Western sector. And just to get the Eastern sector was another 8-year affair. 2005 till 2013. 2013 or 2014 is when HarperCollins picked up and published that book. And as you could see, for a 14 days on the eastern sector, which was basically 1/4 of our air operations, that turned out to be a pretty big volume. And you can imagine what the western sector book would end up being. That being said, once that was out, I started working on the western sector book as well. The progress was not as fast as possible, but I could also see that it was taking up a significant chunk of our personal lives. And we still had our day jobs, we still had our families, our kids were growing up. And if I may say, the community of aviation historians is very small. And you have here one book, Because of This, by Air Marshal Vikram Singh. I know Vikram from a long while. He had helped with some of the research for Eagles over
So
Bangladesh.
this is a new book that's just come out, and Jagan has been good enough to bring me a copy as a gift. And this is the history of 1971 air war by Air Marshal Vikram Singh. The book's called Because of This. And Air Marshal Vikram Singh participated in both the conflicts, 65 and 70.
No, not Vikram Singh. His dad was Air Marshal Preeti Singh. He's so we will edit this out. Right? So
Air Marshal Vikram Singh did not participate.
No.
So he's younger than that.
He's younger. He is a 1980s commissioned Viraj 2000 pilot.
All right. And Air Marshal Vikram Singh's father was also an IAF, noted IAF commander from that era when the two conflicts took place.
Yeah. So at that same time, I knew Vikram was also working on this book, and he was still a serving officer, so he had certain access that we as outsiders, civilians living in America will never ever have. And it really didn't make a sense that both of us should work on a project with similar lines. And I know if he's doing a book, he will do something that will be similar to mine in terms of the detail that he puts in it, and you can see that. So at some point I said, Vikram, you're doing it, you have better access to data, you go ahead and complete it. I will share whatever research I have, whatever inputs I have with you, and some of it, most of it is by himself. There may be a few things that made
That's called
into that book.
Joint manship, a little bit.
And as I said, we are writing these books for the hardcore enthusiasts and
For the nerds.
There have been complaints saying, hey, you put too much detail, you didn't write it for the mass public, aam janta, but
Just watch every evening TV tells you that ठोक दिया, खत्म कर दिया. The other side could not even fire. अकल ही नहीं है.
another version of it is like when this book was being made, I told Vikram, this book is too big. You can't mail it easily. Only the hardcore fanatics will probably try to get it. I said, we are writing it for the future. It will be like a reference book, and that's the approach we took in our
That's
book.
what your books are.
For example, whenever it comes to information, history, background, I end up talking to you, I send you a WhatsApp, I have Anchit that I talk to, I have Angad that I speak to. But for you, how challenging is this?
Anchit is Anchit Gupta and Angad is Angad Singh.
Angad Singh,
see
yeah.
both their Twitter handles on your screens. You can follow them.
And so, how difficult is it for you how do you manage to do all this? And also at the same time, why this interest? Do you have a defense background, or were your family in the Air Force? How did this whole interest come about?
Yeah. So first of all, how do we manage it? Any effort like this wouldn't happen without the support of veterans.
And the website also that you run, which is
Bharat Rakshak, huh?
Bharat Rakshak.
Yeah. The first tough the initial hurdle was basically gaining the trust of veterans. Folks were still not ready to talk about the 65 war in the 90s. Many of the commanders were still alive. So it took some time to build that rapport. But once you put your foot through the door with a couple of well-known names, then the community built itself. And there was a lot of good support from the veterans. Though officially the Indian Air Force could not support us by giving us access to records or anything. And part of that was operating from Hyderabad was not conducive for us to get access to records. Now, what was the second question?
The second question, in the sense that how do you manage the challenges, and whether how did you come about getting into this field?
Getting into
because
this,
you have a completely different career which, as you said, pays you the bread and the butter and probably more. Huh?
So I have to age myself. As a child of the 70s and 80s, we were surrounded by great military literature. We're talking about books that came out of World War II. I mean, World War II was only like 30 years away, which is, much far nearer than almost as close as the Kargil
Commando
War.
comics were still popular.
Commando comics, exactly. I mean, I had a good start with the Commando comics. Then started reading about the RAF, Battle of Britain. Then I discovered the Indian military history part of it. P.C. Lal's book, several Indian Army books. We are talking about Slender Was the Thread or Major Praval's books.
That's Lieutenant General L.P. Sen.
Yes, and so that sort of sparked that interest that you should do some serious military history, and aviation history was a natural progression of growing up on Commando comics and Battle of Britain stories. I mean, most folks do not realize that the degree of the air combat, and again I have to fall back on air battles because that is what sparks the public's imagination. But the amount of operations that happened between India and Pakistan can be the subject of several specialist books, can even form movies, as one of the movies that was recently made on Squadron Leader A.B. Devaya. So that's how the interest sparked. I don't have any family background in the Air Force or in the military, but
You're just a Air Force geek.
Aviation nerd. I'm sure there are
Aviation nerd.
hundreds and thousands of nerds within India. I just took a different path in trying to research about the Air Force.
Oh, lovely. So this is, right now, I'd attended the Run Samvad that was held, the first tri-service military dialogue that was held at the Army War College in Mao. And that is where, again, the whole, the Air Force, vision of theaterization and operations came out in the public again, right? I still remember the famous words of former CDS, late General Bipin Rawat, where he had called the Air Force as the support arm of the Indian Army, right? And right now, the theaterization debate is now back, and the Air Force feels that there should be one unified command, which is under the, the COSC, which is there. So do you think that the Air Force has now, the role of the Air Force has changed from being traditionally a support arm to, do you think that now they can operate on their own, or do they have a separate thing? How do you see the Air Force now? Has the role changed?
Surprisingly, the similar question was asked in the seminar at the USI, where folks had the similar questions, and maybe I will channel some of the answers that I heard over there is, in Op Sindoor, I think the Air Force has pretty much proven that they can fight a war and bring in results on their own if correctly deployed. I might do a small segue and say, when I was listening to the activities of the events of Op Sindoor, sitting abroad and having only the Indian media, social media channels, I sort of felt I was reliving 1965 war all over again, where rumors are flying around, thick messages about Pathankot being under attack, Adhampur being
Or Karachi being bombed?
Karachi being blasted. Nobody knows the complete truth. And if you look at it operationally, we all know that the first day we struck the targets, limited military objectives. There may or may not have been setbacks that we may or may not admit, but we bounced back and struck a target, made our results felt, which is sort of
and got the pictures.
And got the pictures this time. Sort of the similar paths that the 65 war took as well. The amount of confusion and the lack of clarity in information, I sort of felt history was repeating itself in the way we were releasing information or the way we are getting information. The difference, of course, were the satellite photographs. That made
And the drone
complete
footage.
difference. And the drone footage.
Yeah. So now that, are you working besides of the Western sector, are you also looking at the Kargil history? Because Kargil history is also something which has not really officially come out in terms of the air warfare that was there.
So I will drop in I will do a plug on the Kargil history, because two of the names you mentioned in this table, Anchit and Angad, they have been at the forefront of putting together the Kargil air war history.
Okay.
In fact, they have teamed up with Air Marshal Bharat Kumar. I have seen the initial versions of the draft. The draft is, I think they're just putting the finishing touches. So it's 25 years. Now we may see a Kargil Air War history. And funnily enough, I thought we would see one much quicker, but before you know it, 25 years have passed. Now the question comes in, when will we see a true history of the current operations, whether it is
Op Sindoor.
Balakot
Or
or
Op
Op Sindoor? Will it take 10 years? Will it take 20 years? And I think the challenge to the generation of historians now is, can you make it faster than the 40 years we took for 65 war or 25 years we took for the Kargil war? Can you get a history out, a true history out, what's and all, within maybe 5 years or 10 years? I mean, that is up for debate. What do you think?
Well, as long as there are nerds like you, and you said hundreds and thousands, they are not hundreds and thousands.
Exactly.
There is a much smaller number of literate nerds and who are also open-minded. So, but as long as you guys are there, I know it was a different kind of movie, but the metaphor is good. That is, those magnificent men in their flying machines. So you magnificent nerds and the flying machines that you are fascinated with, as long as you are there, this substantive work will keep coming out. And good thing is that you seem to be collaborating more than competing. So I see you talking so enthusiastically about what Anchit and Angad are doing now. And in fact, in that national interest column, another book I relied on was Fizaya. That was the history and psyche of Pakistan Air Force, written by late Pushpinder Singh and Ravi Rikhe. And I had said that his son had promised to bring out an updated version of Fizaya. That's out, and this is updated up to Op Sindoor. So that's also part of your community, isn't it? This is Ravi Rikhe and still carries Pushpinder Singh Chopra's name.
Yeah.
Yes.
And these are and some of this writing, because it pertains to Pakistan Air Force, it is so clinical that it can get the Indian enthusiast irritated, and Pakistani enthusiasts will start worrying about, if this looks so fair, then how do I dismiss the stuff it actually says by way of the achievements of the IAF? And that is the true sense of a military historian, isn't it? To test.
Yes. So again, right, when I spoke with other aviation authors, the question to answer is, will your book stand the test of time? Will people say 50 years from now, this author did a fair job of documenting successes, failures, was it fair to the other side? This is not a question about India versus Pakistan or our enemy. Are you writing a book that future historians can rely on? And I think within India, or that small community of aviation nerds / historians, we are meeting that expectation. And there may be a few people across the border as well. But at some point, I would hope that tribe increases on both sides.
Well, on that wish, we'll let you go. We can talk for hours, as you know. So thank you for being there, and thank you for doing the work that you people do, because that's what helps journalists like, I'm now a different generation, but journalists like Snehesh, who have to search for information all the time and to get authentic stuff all the time. You guys play an invaluable role. So thank you very much, Jagan.
Thank you very much.
And I'm still hoping the 1971 Western Sector will come out.
It will.
In addition to Air Marshal Vikram Singh's book.
Definitely. It definitely will. But I cannot give you any time.